This video is going to show you what a good session looks like, because don't you want to be in a situation where you finish your session if you're coaching and the parent comes up to you and just says, thank you, that was great. And it sounds simple, but if I was the parent, I'd also want to say that. So we're just going to break down what is a good session and how does it look. And it kind of starts from the very beginning. The moment that parents, the players arrive, what kind of tone are we setting? And that's what we want to work out at this point. Getting to a session, being organized, let's assume a few things as if you're from a coaching perspective. When the children arrive, what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to get the footballs, but let's be mindful about everyone arriving. You've got goals, you've got all kinds of things going on. So have a structure. When a parent arrives, you want to funnel them into a watch area zone. You might have chairs, you might have some kind of view gallery. Your players are going to go off in another direction. And we've talked briefly before about how to organize kids when they arrive. And you should really have a structure where you've got some fun things going on. And as players filter in, they can still have fun, a little knockabout before the session starts, but they do it in a way that's structured a little bit, because otherwise you're going to get this scenario where there's a bit of chaos, someone's going to get smacked in the face by a ball or whatever it is. I'll give you an example of a standard session. If there's 15 children in a session and there could be 2 or 3 coaches, and I might have, for example, the lead of the session, I might have 1 or 2 coaches assisting. And what is it that we're all doing? Well, at the start, we're just saying hi to everyone, just having a little bit of a joke. We've got things laid out. And when we're ready to start, we start properly. Now, we get the children in and we go through the agenda, essentially. Now, the parents by this point are all watching. And what we try and do is get in a situation where the parents can actually hear what we're saying, especially at the early part. Let's explain to the children, but let the parents know what our plan is for this session. For example, what is it that we're trying to achieve today? And we're going to get onto that agenda after we've had that first few moments talking to the children. So let's give an example. We could have a 7 to 8-year-old group. Let's just use something, not the youngest, not the oldest. Ask them some questions. They're going to be sat down. We're going to get some interaction. We're going to get a vibe of who's listening, who's wanting to play, who really doesn't want to interact socially. And we're going to try and break those little barriers at the very start. We'll try and make everyone feel comfortable. And in a group, everyone has different levels of what comfortable looks like. So we have to bear that in mind. There's going to be a quieter child, there's going to be a louder child, and we're going to try and work out how best suited we are in that moment to kind of get everyone ready for the session. We tell them what the session is going to look like. The parents hear what the session is going to look like, and we essentially start that session. Now, at this point, I normally break away and let this first part by my other coaches kind of set the tone, and I can just observe how it's going, and I can just get an understanding about the children in the session. So what I would always try and do is, if you can, have a situation where you can take a step back early on and kind of see what you think is going to work, what you think might be a challenge. You normally find this out by just taking a step back in those early stages. And then what I try and do while that's happening, I'll just walk along and say hello to the parents. The parents feel appreciated. And one of the challenges I had, my boy's older now, he's a teenager, but when I first started taking him to activity groups from a real young age, 3, 4, 5 years old, a lot of the classes kind of felt like a little dump, stay and play, and it didn't really resonate with what I was hoping for. Not all, but generally speaking, the session was being run by somebody that didn't necessarily have amazing experience and didn't necessarily have the social skills to kind of be confident to communicate with me. So I think parents really do like that opportunity from whoever's running the session to just say hello and check in. It doesn't have to be long. But if you're running a session and you've got younger assistants, say 16 to 18-year-olds, it's very rare that you get someone that has that authority presence. Generally speaking, confidence building in younger coaches takes a little bit of time. So as the senior coach, you should try and have a situation where we get parents feeling comfortable, check in, etc., etc. So if you get that first few minutes right in a session, I feel like your parents feel more at ease. They've asked you questions that might have been on their mind that they wouldn't have asked unless you approached. You can kind of iron out what the problem is, or not. There might not be any problems. I think the key thing once we get going with the session is, are the parents engaged and are they relaxed about the situation that they're in? And I try and say to the coaches that run the sessions with myself, obviously supporting, and it's all about inclusion, right? It's because, again, taking a step back from a session, you can tend to see certain patterns. You can see the pattern of the child that's not quite getting it, that doesn't understand it, or can't, for whatever reason, hasn't heard the instruction right. You can see the person who's perhaps always interrupting or being a bit of a so-and-so, and they're just not listening. And you can't do is, if you've lost a session, is deal with those extra problems easily, because they just all mount up. So focus at the beginning of the session. Focus on your communication, focus on the engagement. If you do these things right, the session can be set up. By the end of the session, they could see in the game, look, they were moving and they took a touch and they tried to do what we were asking, and it was great. So all these things are kind of lined up to make the session ultimately make sense for the player and for the parent. I want to know what your thoughts are. I mean, I gave you a quick example earlier about when my child was younger. I was a little bit unsure about certain sessions we viewed and went to, because the lack of structure, the stay and play, and the lack of communication, I just didn't feel like it was what my child needed. My boy was definitely a quieter child, probably need a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more support. And, you got to notice that in a session as a coach. And parents want to see that too. You want to see that if your child is a little bit quiet or a little bit kind of needs that time to the side, or they like a particular coach that can help them, you got to figure that out. Because if you don't, you'll lose players and you'll lose parents, because they won't see the progress. But if you work hard at the beginning for what you're trying to achieve, you will get results, and you will build a platform for your players that they can just spring off from. And just continually develop. Focus on the beginning part. Focus on the understanding. Focus on the fun, the engagement, and make sure that both player and parent are clear and that they know exactly what's going on. I look for a specific criteria. Is this a place where my children have fun? Is it a place where they can learn? Do I think that they are safe and being nurtured to develop? And, I look at the coaches, and I also I'm critical about what presence and what structure and what influence they have on the whole group. Those were my key things. But what's yours as a parent? And if you're a coach, what do you find the most challenging? I don't care if you've coached for a day or 25 years like me. It's like every session's different. Every player's different. There's challenges getting thrown up all the time. If there's something that we can do to kind of open up a platform for helping, that's what we want to do on this channel.